Welcome to Being Human. I'm delighted to welcome today Roy Baumeister, social psychologist, highly successful author of many, couple of decades standing now with several books, including the New York Times bestseller, Willpower. Roy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Richard. Glad to be here.
So let's start with Willpower, which was the book that was recommended to me by none other than David Allen. He's a former guest on the show. What do we mean by willpower, and why was it so important for you to write about?
Well, it was important because it's one of the keys to success in life. Self-control is the trait. Willpower is the energy that powers self-control. And understanding how self-control works is really vital. I started out studying self-esteem early in my career, because we had the hope that boosting people's self-esteem would make them better, happier, better for themselves and better for society. But self-esteem didn't really deliver on its promises very well. Boosting self-esteem just kind of makes people more conceited and doesn't produce, other than, it feels good while you're enjoying thinking how great you are. It doesn't have a lot of positive consequences. But self-control seems to be the real deal. It really does produce all sorts of benefits to life, both for the individual and society. So it's a win on both sides. So people with good self-control, they do better at work and school, they're more popular, they have better relationships, they're happier, they're healthier, they stay out of trouble, they have fewer personal behavioral problems, and they live longer.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. They live, for longevity. And in terms of the sort of, so if self-control is one of these key traits that predict success, what have you learned in terms of how we can develop our self-control or become better at self-control over time? What have you discovered there?
Well, first is understanding how it works. What my research found was that it seems to depend on an energy, hence the term willpower, which we adopted very reluctantly. Psychologists hesitate to pick up terms from popular discourse because they have a lot of excess meanings on them. But no, there really did seem to be a kind of energy in it, so that after you exert self-control, it's as if you've expended some of the energy. So if another demand for self-control comes along, you don't tend to do as well. It's as if you've used up some of your willpower, and until it has a chance to replenish, you're down. It's a bit like a muscle that after you exert it, it's tired. So it doesn't perform quite as well until you get a chance to rest and recover. And people continue to find all sorts of effects going on like this, that as the day wears on, for example, people gradually get tired. I mean, if it's a day at the beach and you're not working very hard, well, then you have all your self-control resources available in the evening. But if it's a day at work, you gradually expend some of your self-control, being nice to people, following the rules, making yourself do things you don't necessarily want to do, which is one definition of work. And so in the evening, after the long day, your willpower tends to be low. And a lot of the problems in self-control tend to surface in the evening. So people break their diets mostly in the evening, not first thing in the morning. Crime sprees, low self-control is one of the key explanations to criminality. But people don't leap out of bed first thing in the morning and go on a crime spree or a drug spree or a sex spree or anything like that. Most impulsive crimes are committed after midnight. In fact, as I said, diets broken in the evening, drug relapses, smoking too much, drinking too much, sleeping with the wrong person, being nasty to your romantic partner and you're not controlling your emotions properly. All these things become more likely late in the day after people have expended some of their energy and willpower. We found in laboratory, it seems to work even in the short run. If we can give people a challenging first self-control task, that uses up some of their energy, and then we come around, hit them with another task, even if it seems quite different, they don't do as well on the second one.
Right. And the famous case that I noted in the book is of the judges. They did the study. It was Israeli researchers studied parole board judges in terms of the decisions they make over the course of the day. And how
yes, that was not my study, but I know you guys did it. Yes, I mean, the safe thing, the easy thing for the parole judges is just say no, 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 and send them all back to prison. You're taking a chance to send them out into society. If they commit another crime, it makes the judge look bad. But some of the men have paid their debt and have reformed and so on. And what they found is first thing in the morning, the guys that come up first have a pretty good chance of getting parole. But this goes down as the day wears on, with two exceptions: when the judge gets a break and gets something to eat, lunchtime being the big one, then the likelihood of granting parole goes up again. It's because as far as you can tell, your willpower is based partly on your body's energy supply, and that comes from food. So when you get more food, then it's more willing to expend energy again on this challenging sort of thing.
Right. And I also, on the prison team, one statistic I found fascinating. I think they'd done this study in Finnish prisons, and they found that glucose intolerance was a good predictor of future criminality of prisoners leaving prison. Right, recidivism amongst the leavers from prison.
Yes. That one I don't remember as clearly now, but the general point is quite relevant. Glucose. I don't know how much your viewers know about glucose, but it's a chemical in the bloodstream that carries the body's energy. I mean, it means sugar, but it's not just sugar. I mean, you get glucose from eating meat or any sort of thing, and so it carries this energy. The blood carries this energy around to your brain, to your muscles, to your other organs. And the body manages it. And when your glucose starts to go down, self-control is one of the things your body would rather sacrifice than some of the more vital things that it needs to keep body and soul together. So self-control tends to deteriorate then. So yes, people who have problems with glucose are more trouble with, more prone to self-control failure. That includes, we talked about people with diabetes who actually may have plenty of glucose, but it doesn't do them any good because without the insulin, they're not processing it, so it doesn't function as energy as effectively, and they get into that state where they can't use it, and so they're more prone to impulsive behaviors and mood swings and other sorts of things.
And I found that in terms of my own daily practice now, I'm becoming much more aware, having read your book, about my glucose level and where I dip. And I noticed absolutely at the end of the day that I'm way more likely to engage in, let's say, compulsive behaviors. And so I'm like trying to set up my day, because you talk about this, a pre-commitment, right? Like trying to, and I know I'm conflating two ideas slightly here, but this, so for me, it's like trying to set up my day such that I don't have major glucose dips, especially when I know I'm going to do something that's maybe depleting of my energy towards the end of the day. And so I do regular therapy sessions, and I know that after therapy, I'm usually feeling like super low energy.
Yeah, it takes a lot out of you for sure.
Yeah, it's quite like intense. And I notice that's when I'm often most vulnerable to engage in activities I prefer not to be engaging in. So this has given me the thought, well, how could I set my day up such that I make sure that I've got a meal ready, like as soon as I come out of the session, and I have a good meal beforehand, and I keep my glucose high, especially when I know I'm most likely to have a dip. So that's an extreme example, but also just working during the day where I need brain power and willpower, should I say, to be productive during the day, is to monitor my glucose.
Yes, all that's very important, and that's a nice model for people to follow. If you plan ahead and understand, it's the amount of willpower you have available fluctuates through the day, and it's tied to your body's energy supply. So be prepared for that. And it's why even things like I read a study where people who are trying to quit smoking and diet to lose weight, if they're trying to do both, they do a lousy job of both. Well, they both place demands on your willpower. Dieting itself is particularly a problem because you're not eating enough, so you're not getting enough energy. So there's a kind of circular problem or a catch-22 that you don't have enough energy to have the willpower to resist the food. So, and to the extent you resist it, you still don't get the food that you need. So planning in that way and managing it as a limited resource, like you do, you know you're going to be wiped out at this point. Well, you're built in, be prepared with something to eat and some kind of break to allow your powers to replenish. I talked to a guy who does marital therapy, and he said before he even knew my research, he said he kind of stumbled on a similar thing. He started telling his clients to go home early and spend more time together. He didn't know why that worked. You'd think you're having a bad marriage, spending more time together might cause problems. But he said if you stay at work and you use up all your energy there, all your willpower, then you get home and the first time something bothers you, you fly off the handle. And so save some of your energy, save some of your self-control willpower to go so that you can make yourself be nice and try to patch up the relationship.
Right. To go home. Yeah. So and that's, yeah. I mean, this is, and what's interesting to me as well is what you mentioned in the book, that we haven't evolved any mechanisms that allow us to detect that we're low on willpower, right? We get no sign to say, I'm low on willpower, I better eat some food or we don't have any intuition that we're in that state, right?
Right. Yeah, the closest is we found it seems to turn up the volume on life, that things strike you more intensely. We're still trying to figure that out, although our colleague who was doing this research with us temporarily off on doing some other things. But it seems like as you grow up, you learn to damp down all your emotional reactions and play cool. And my impression is that's part of what we love about children is they react so strongly to everything. The heart is totally on the sleeve, as they say. And so they haven't yet learned to be cool and hide it down. Well, when you're an adult, you kind of have this process that's damping down your reactions. But when you get depleted, things hit you much harder, both for good and for bad. So that's one sign, but it's not a very clear or strong one. It would be nice if we had a clear signal that better be careful. Self-control is not working as well as usual, and I'll be prone to making bad decisions or doing things I'll be sorry for.
Right. And so a lot of these common sense routines sort of make sense in the light of this, right? Having regular meal times, getting home early and having a good meal, and having the evening to spend with your wife or your partner or your husband and so on. They seem to make sense in light of this research, right?
Yes.
Develop social practices which seem to account for this without us being particularly aware of this particular mechanism.
Yes.
Yeah. So the other thing I touched on there was this idea of pre-commitment. So one of the tactics we can use, and a lot of people who are renowned as having great willpower use, is this idea of pre-commitment. Can you talk a bit more about what that means and how people...
Okay. Well, pre-commitment, as the term implies, it's making the commitment in advance so that you're not making the decision in the heat of the moment. And you can make the decision when you've got your full powers about you. And that way, at the moment when you might be in the term "a moment of weakness" is very apt. It means that your willpower is down, and so you'll have a moment of weakness, and people know that's when you do bad things. That when self-control breaks down, and you spend too much money, or go back to smoking or drinking, or whatever it is, sleep with the wrong person. Pre-commitment is locking yourself in advance. And my friend George Lowenstein, I think, remarked once that, well, it's easy to decide to diet when you're not hungry. But when people do, and they go on a diet, one form is they get rid of all the candy and chips and fattening foods, so that late at night when they're in a more vulnerable, perhaps more of a weak moment, they're not tempted because they can't eat that stuff if it's there and available. Even though you tell yourself, I shouldn't eat those things. Well, at the moment when you're tempted and you want a treat, then you might go ahead and do it. The same thing, pre-commitment with savings. People have trouble saving money, but they sign up to have something automatically deducted from their paycheck and put in a bank account, and it's somehow locked in so they can't simply take it out and spend it. Well, they are, I think the original pre-commitment was Ulysses or Odysseus coming back from the siege of Troy and tying himself to the mast so that he could listen to the siren song and not be tempted to seize the wheel and steer the boat onto the rocks, which so many other sailors had done. You make that commitment. It means not. The two ways of looking at it means not relying on willpower to get you through the most difficult, tempting moment. But in a sense, it's a more enlightened use of willpower because you have to plan in advance and make those commitments. And we find that the people who have good self-control, I think we all know some people are better at self-control than other people. So the people who are good at it, it's not that they have more willpower. That's a misconception. And we wondered about that for a while, but no. In the laboratory, we put them through their paces. They look like anybody else. But what they do is they use it with these things like pre-commitment. They set up their lives to run on automatic pilot. They break bad habits and they form good habits, and then life goes smoothly. So I think I mentioned just before this, I was having my exercise workout. When you take up exercise, if you haven't ever done it, it's a big struggle to get yourself to go out there and run or whatever, and you have to use a fair amount of willpower to do it. But you lock yourself in, and you have a habit and just going to do it every day at a certain time. Then it becomes something that you don't have to use a lot of energy to do. It doesn't require that much willpower. It's just, it's time to go exercise. Likewise, people pre-commit with social commitments. So, you arrange to meet your friend to go running at 9 in the morning or 5 at night or whenever, and then the other person is waiting for you, and so it's not up to you. You don't really have the option of not doing it. One thing that worked for me early on was having a dog who loved to go running and come home from work tired, and I said, I don't know if I can go running today. And the dog is like, are you kidding me? He's been looking forward to it all day. So there was having the dog and having the dog have the habit of the regular run late in the day. That was a kind of pre-commitment, and it takes the strain off of needing willpower to make all your decisions.
You touched on there about this idea of making a commitment to somebody else. Can that be useful in terms of commitment to your peers or publicly?
Oh, yes. These are some of the best ones. I know a lot of people have these watches now that keep track of how many steps you take, and they have a target of 8,000 or 10,000 steps during the day or whatever. But the ones who do this publicly, they'll join a group who every day will post how many they do. Well, then it's harder to slack off because the other people are saying, I see you only went 3,000 steps yesterday. What are you becoming a couch potato? Yes, again, people respond very much to how they're perceived by others, and social commitments are really, really helpful in a lot of these things. Mm-hmm. It's one of these ways that marriages can make people better. Sometimes one person has to change the diet for health reasons or whatever, and so the other kind of embraces that and says, okay, well, we'll both eat this healthy food together, and that makes it easier and strengthens the commitment, and you're less tempted if you're eating your boring healthy food while everyone else is having steak and French fries and fried chicken and all sorts of delicious things. So that's a little hard, but doing it with others, that helps, and everybody stays good.
Right. And I think you mentioned there's a software service you could sign up to that would, one example was it would email all of your browser history to your boss at a scheduled time. Right.
Yes.
So
yes.
This idea of, as an upfront commitment to monitoring. So you talk about that and the quantified self and this idea of monitoring yourself and then making that public. Can you talk a bit about that?
Sure. This part was more my co-author, John Tierney, who wrote the book with me. Who's a science journalist. But the way he sort of summed it up is that, we have new challenges in self-control today. It's not like when you carried around cash in your pocket and when it was gone, so you couldn't get into too deep a trouble. He said now with credit and everything, and you can go online and in 20 minutes ruin your budget for the rest of the year. On the other hand, technology can be your friend too and can bolster and help self-control by using some of these online services that will track all your expenditures and send you feedback and saying, oh, you spent more money than usual on beer last week, or you're exceeding your target. And so you can get feedback that can help restore self-control again. Technology in a variety of ways is improving self-control. I mean, even in morality, which is one of the major applications of self-control throughout history. It takes self-control to be a good person because it means not acting on your selfish impulses, but doing what's good and right. And as we got into bigger and bigger cities and more anonymity, people had more of a chance that they could just get away with things and do things that others couldn't do. But now that there are cameras starting to appear everywhere and people have phones that capture things, now people have to watch what they're doing much more and keep track of or worry that their misdeeds will be known to others and posted online. So technology really is a double-edged sword in terms of self-control. It can weaken as well as strengthen.
That's interesting. Well, I just think about the argument about our lives becoming more public again through technology. We sort of had this period where we were able to keep private lives, and I read online someone making the point that actually the norm for humans is to have actually very public lives. And this idea of a right to privacy is relatively new in human history.
Yes. Quite a bit about this is the argument that people were hardly ever alone in the past, and plus you didn't meet very many strangers. You go back to medieval Europe, when people lived in farming villages and everybody knew everybody. One scholar estimates that a person might only see 100 other human beings in their entire life in a small village like that. There wasn't much travel. You didn't go places. Other people didn't come there. And so if you did something bad, people would know it for years afterwards. It would affect your reputation, and that was a powerful force. Other great ideas, I think, in Friedman's History of Law, says that morality and law do the same things, but morality relies on reputation. And so as we have more and more stranger interactions, people can cheat someone and get away with it. And so we need laws to step in and take the place of morality. But now with technology coming out and strengthening this, then people are accountable in a way that kind of goes back to like living in a small village, except you're accountable to millions of people who can see what you did wrong.
Right, and then so the Chinese are developing this sort of social score, aren't they? And then there was a lot of headlines recently about Facebook have some version of a social score for you. And there's a lot of outrage around it and fear around it, I think, understandably at some level. But yeah, perhaps, again, this is an example of us going back to something that was actually normal for humans.
Yes, I don't know the details of these things, but yes, it's the same with rating services and companies and so on. They can't just come and offer you poor service. because people will rate them and their reputation matters. I noticed the Uber car service, the drivers rate the passengers and the passengers rate the drivers. And well, that's a pretty good incentive to be nice on both sides.
Yeah, I was devastated when I discovered my Uber score, which was 4.6, and apparently that's pretty low. And it had a big impact. I'm like, damn, I should be upping my game with being polite to drivers. Apparently, one of the biggest reasons for an Uber passenger getting a low score is showing up late. And so I've been really upping my consciousness about, making sure I'm on time for the Uber. And
yeah, yes.
And I didn't expect to have that much of a wreck, because on the one hand, why do I really care? It doesn't sort of affect me in any other area of my life whether I've got a good Uber score. And apparently, you have to have a really, really low Uber score before they won't pick you up. But there was some sense of pride, and this knowing that I was below average actually was the biggest motivator.
Yes, well, I think my guess is that we evolved to care very much about what other people think of us, and that's one of the key human advances. And there are complicated arguments around that, but self-control, which again is much more advanced in humans than in other species, was probably to adjust ourselves to the social group and motivated by concern with reputation. We evolved to cooperate. We're not great hunters by ourselves, but we're terrific hunters as groups. For that, you have to cooperate with others. And if others don't like you and they're not going to work with you, well, you'd starve.
Right. And I think you make the argument that we evolved our very large brains and high intelligence was to navigate I think you make the point more in your book, the cultural element, right? That it was to navigate culture and our social network more than problem solving, let's say.
Right. Yes. I think even the key human trait is that set us apart. We name ourselves after intelligence, Homo sapiens. But communication, I think, was the original one, the social sharing of information. We do that much more than other species. And development of language and so on. And, that's intelligence was a result of that, because, a brain is a very costly organ. And so if you grow a big brain, unless it's going to bring you more food or something, it will just use a lot more calories and again, increase the risk of starving. So there had to be stuff for the brain to do. And it's when we started sharing information, that's when there was a selection environment that, suddenly the brain had a lot more information to deal with. And so bigger brains would pay off in a way that they hadn't when we lived like chimpanzees.
Right. And then one example of the information sharing that you use, which I thought was poignant, was this idea that we're intentional teachers. And when they've studied chimps, chimps might learn a new trick, like, I don't know, how to smash open a nut or something, but they won't teach it to other chimps. They don't have
right,
that
impulse. Yes. But we just read someone who reviewed all the literature, and I said intentional there's learning everywhere. Most animals learn, but teaching is pretty specific to humankind. All known cultures do some form of teaching. They don't all have universities and so on. But the old ones deliberately try to teach the young ones, and people share skills and so on. And they said, there's nothing really in any other species that's a full-fledged example of teaching. There are a couple things. Sometimes a grown-up animal will bring a dead mouse or whatever for the little one to play with and kill. But it isn't really, that could be a hardwired thing, and it isn't clear that it has the idea that I know something you don't, and so let me show you how to do this. Whereas again, all humans do. So yes, that's a crucial thing, and it sets us apart as humankind.
Right. And actually, there's a couple of other themes in the cultural animal I'd love to explore. But just before we dive into that, just finally on the willpower point. This podcast is, we hope that this has a broad range of listeners in business. Have you ever worked with managers or executives and been asked the question, what should I do for my team, or how could I take some of these learnings and use them in the workplace? Is that something you've explored?
I'm not done with that. I'm a basic laboratory researcher, so trying to figure out the basic processes, and then I come with also I work in different areas trying to come up with a large abstract understanding of what being human is all about. But applications, it's tremendously important, but someone else will have to do that.
Okay. That makes sense. Read the book, perhaps. And I think because certainly what I've taken from it is learning about this has been instructive, because one of the things that I got was, decision making it's a calorific activity, right? And it depletes over time. So the more decision making we do, the less capacity we have to do more high quality decision making.
Yeah, well, that's a key point, is that making decisions uses up willpower too. And this was a big step for us. So it isn't, willpower is not just for self-control, but after you make a lot of decisions, your self-control is likely to be worse, and vice versa. After you exert self-control, it's going to affect your decision making. So that's something that the few times I have talked to business people and so on, that they found useful to know. It explains sort of the work-family interactions, that, if you're having problems at home in the family, that's going to suck up a lot of your willpower, and you're not going to have as much. So at work, you'll be more crabby, poorer self-control, more impulsive, and also your decision-making may not be as thorough and thoughtful. People with low willpower changes how they make decisions. They're more using shortcuts. They don't sort through the information as well to say, I should make the decision based on these three things and ignore these things. They're either swayed by everything. They're also more prone to put off decisions if they can. Basically, there are several styles of decision making. You can think things through carefully and rationally and so on, or you can make them in a more shallow, impulsive manner. And when willpower is low, it drifts toward the latter. You got tough decisions to make. You want to make them in the morning, not at the end of a hard day.
Right. And or if you've got things that you resist doing. And I think there's the book Eat Your Frog, which is this idea that the thing that you most resist doing, do that first thing in the morning. Do that because that's when your willpower or self-control to stick with that uncomfortable task is going to be at its highest.
Right. Yes.
And I've actually, so what was interesting is I'd started doing, because one of the things I hate doing, and part of my job is to do sales calls, right? To do outreach, call customers and call prospects. And, that's a bit of my job that I find the most difficult to sort of put myself into. And since I've started doing that, that's the second I check my emails and then I start on that and I found that I've got much more of a rhythm doing that than when I was sort of scheduling it in somewhat on an ad hoc basis. I'm completely consistent now with having read your material.
Okay, good.
So that was the one insight, and I thought, and that as a message for teams as well. Like maybe as a team, what you want to do is, if as a team you've got something that's really tough and you've been resisting and you've all been putting off, maybe you commit to doing it, and then maybe there's a pre-commitment. So you say, okay, well, we're going to schedule it in the diary for Monday morning, and we're all going to clear up, and we're all going to do it, and we're going to do it at a time when we know all of our glucose levels are going to be relatively high. That was one thought I had about how you could apply it. And I suspect there's some level of that goes on in any case. It's just becoming consciously aware of why we do some of these things that feel like common sense, but actually there's a lot of good science now behind why we might do them. Yeah. Something that I wanted to pick up on the cultural. So the other insight here, which sort of takes it a bit more into my personal experience around self-control, has been that I've spent a lot of time working through therapy, which I touched on earlier, on some of my earlier experiences, and going back and reliving some of those experiences. And I've found that I have become less compulsive over time. the more work I've done now, of course, maybe there's some other reason, but my intuition is that this therapy work has been key and instrumental, and certainly one of the causes of me developing more self-control over time. And I think the earlier experiences, it may just be for me, those are when I had the most traumatic experiences, but for me, it seems to be the work on that very early period has had the biggest impact. And I noticed in the cultural animal, when you in the chapter How People Think, you have some skepticism about early memories and the idea of recovered memories from early in childhood. And it's been my intrinsic memory, so not the declarative memory, not the memory that I have a sort of clear picture in my mind, but a sort of felt sense of what happened early on, where I've done the work and processed and grieved around some of those experiences that have had the biggest impact in terms of me feeling that I'm better able to control my impulses. So I just wanted to get your reflections on that.
All right. That may or may not have to do with a self-control thing, but if you have unresolved issues from the past, it's very possible that those are a constant drain on your willpower. There's one theory that might well be true, is that what really takes the energy is inhibiting things, is overriding, stopping things. And so if you have a difficult memory that you're trying to shut out of your mind and it keeps coming back and you're struggling with it, well, it's going to be like a leak in the gas tank. It's going to be constantly taking some of your energy, even when you're doing stuff that has nothing to do with that. It just always eats at you and takes away some of your energy. So quite possibly facing it and resolving it in your mind and coming to an understanding that, well, that's your life and that happened, and accepting it, and you can move on. Then you can stop fighting it on a subsequent constant basis, and that would indeed free up more willpower for other challenges. I mean, this is speculation. I haven't done research on childhood problems and traumas and things like that.
That would make that would make a lot of sense. So it's actually an indirect effect. So it's
indirect effect.
Not having so much of a drain. Because that's consistent with it. Well, certainly the theory around the proponents of one's ability to go back and resolve old trauma is this idea that we have defense mechanisms that are constantly working in our subconscious. I know there may be some questions about the extent of our subconscious or the nature of it, but nonetheless, their view is that we have subconscious mechanisms which are there to suppress and repress old feelings associated with old memories that are constantly running, and then that we sort of act on top of those. Our conscious thoughts and our actions are actually, in some sense, a projection of what's happening there. And actually, so the theory would be that over time we have less need of those defenses. We become more authentic, but equally we're not using energy to suppress and repress feelings.
Yes, and defenses very likely take some of this energy, and even if they're not fully conscious, they could still sap your energy, and that takes away a key part of what you can use for your vitality in life, making life.
Yeah. Okay, and I'd like to know what's next for you, or what's current for you. I mean, where are you taking the science at the moment? What's your focus?
My current research projects are studying how people think about the future. That's another line of work. And the link, there is some link to self-control. Self-control involves planning, precommitments, things like that. But it's to me, it's not a direct outgrowth of the self-control research. the self-control research, when it started to link to making decisions, and we needed a bigger umbrella, and that sort of got me into the philosophical issues of free will. So I've been thinking about those terms. It's an extensive literature in multiple fields, arguing about in what sense do and do not people have free will. How does that operate with things? And to me, the thinking about the future is an important part of that. The way I look at it, put it this way, human beings, we control our behavior. There's a mechanism inside us that controls and decides what to do that's way more complex and advanced than what's seen in any other species. Now, whether it deserves the name free will or not, that's kind of a semantic argument, and I'll leave that to the philosophers and the experts there. But that's the reality behind it, and understanding that is a good job for a psychologist. In that connection, it's always exciting to be working on a big classic problem like free will that people have debated for a long time. That's something I'm working on as well.
Right. And any sort of early surprises in that research, something you weren't expecting to discover around?
Oh, I'm thinking about the future?
Future.
Oh, planning.
Well, or both. I mean, I was using those as equivalent, but perhaps they're not actually thinking about the future.
Yeah. People do a lot of planning. Most of the time when they say they're thinking about the future, they're planning, which is a little bit of, I guess, a surprise to the psychologists, because mostly when they say, we should study how people think about the future, they start with prediction. And can you predict what's going to happen? But more and more, I think it's not predicting how things will turn out. That's not the goal. It's predicting the choice points, the crossroads. You want to predict even like tomorrow, what are the points at which it can go different ways? Because those are the ones I need to be prepared to deal with. And I can use pre-commitment or advanced rational thought or whatever. But at some point someone's come up with you and say, what are you going to do, this or this? You don't want to be starting to think about it right then. You want to be prepared to deal with it. Or your choices are one, and also performances. So, where are the points where you can do well or badly, and you want to be prepared to do a good job for that. The future really it's not predicting the outcome, but calling the matrix of maybe. The place with a bunch of different possibilities that some will happen and some won't, and those are the things you most want to anticipate and be prepared for.
And you think that's more productive to put thought into potential scenarios than to attempt to predict the future? Is that the
Yes. I think that Jim Collins who did the Good to Great work. I looked at people who managed companies that really got better and stayed better for a long time. And it was a nice data-based way of saying who the best leaders are. And he found they weren't any better than the others at predicting the future or what's going to happen. But they were more thorough about all the different possibilities and contingency plans. So if things didn't go according to their preferred way, they had a backup plan ready, and they had alternatives. So again, it's not being able to predict how it's all going to end up, but to predict all the contingencies and possibilities, and be prepared for the strange twists of fate that happen to us, because very rarely does everything go according to plan.
That's interesting. And that's consistent with some of the people. We've had a couple of complexity theorists on the show, and they definitely have the view that we're way less well equipped to predict the future than we think we are.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Yes. It's almost as if, I think there has been work on our biases that have humans be overconfident in their ability to predict the future. But that also seemed to touch on something that you wrote about, I think, again, in the cultural element, about the distinction between Western and Eastern thinking, and how the Eastern mind is perhaps more likely to be able to ascribe multiple causes for a particular outcome. Would that then lend itself to being more open to this style of thinking about the future, or do you see a connection there or not?
Oh, well, that's a fascinating idea. I've not done any cross-cultural comparisons on that. I mean, yes, there's a more holistic thinking in the Eastern mind, and so they see things as much more interrelated, and are more comfortable with things switching back and forth as well. Um, but it's also suited to a style of mind where it's not where you individually don't have as much control. So some of our studies, when Easterners, have an opportunity for control and the need to do control, then they switch and turn to be more like Westerners to think in the Western analytical style of what exactly causes what and what's going on, because that helps them deal with things.
Mm. But as a disposition, it may be that, well, that may be a hypothesis worth testing, isn't it? With dispositionally, yes. The Eastern mind is better equipped for this or suited for this scenario style. Thinking of the future. Great. Okay. Well, thank you. That sounds fascinating. Do you expect a book at some point? I mean, you're prolific on your book writing. That did have me think, God, you must have this willpower lick to be as productive as you are on the book writing.
Oh, thanks. I do like writing, and it's not as hard. Right now, I'm writing a book on the self, and so when that's done, there are several options as to which one will be next. I hope to have it done in about a year. But it's one of the big psychology problems of self and identity, and how do we know what we are and become what we are. So some of this will find its way in there, and certainly self-control is a big part of it. But immediate plans to write a book on the self. Actually, Martin Seligman and I two other guys just published one, I think last year. It was an early compilation of thinking about the future, but there's much more since we're now collecting all sorts of data. I hope to know more about it in 5 years.
Fantastic. Okay. And then my final question, I ask a lot of my guests: what for you is it to be human?
But to be, well, I wasn't prepared for that. I mean, one of my colleagues here, Thomas Sudendorf, has a book called The Gap, which talks about the difference between humans and other species and evolutionary analysis there. So, that's my point of departure. Yes, we are animals, but we're also more than animals. And we have styles of mind, of thinking and feeling and acting that are above and beyond what other animals do. And that's why we created this marvelous civilization and culture. But it includes things like morality and concern with reputation and self-control. People deal in information much more than other animals. They deal in money. They're moral agents too, the understanding of morality. I'm not religious, but again, religion is a very important part of the human experience and something that sets us apart from other creatures. So, the symbolic realm, the understanding of language, the advanced form of consciousness, all these things I think are really vital parts of being human.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. And I'm really excited about the next book. And I'll have to be honest, I didn't realize you had another book with Martin Seligman, so I should check that out as well.
Okay. Yeah.
We'll put links to everything we've mentioned in the description for the show.
Okay. Well, thanks, Richard, for the great conversation, and let's talk again.
And in terms of places to find you on the internet, where's best? I mean, do you do much on the internet, or is it mainly your books?
I'm not that. I don't do the internet for its own sake. I'm not on Facebook or those things. I have a homepage that somebody maintains for me.
Right.
And so on. I mean, people can Google my name and find things there. But I think the scientific publications and the books are the main place to my contribution to humanity and civilization is to be found.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much again. Thanks for your time. It's been a fascinating and rewarding conversation. And thank you for the contribution to my life of especially the Willpower book. It has
Thank you. It's very nice of you. Thanks for saying
that. A real contribution to my quality of my life. Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day, evening. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.